the Independent National Electoral Commission has said the collation of results of the 2023 general elections will be done manually, despite the adoption of electronic transmission of results. INEC's National Commissioner and Chairman of its Information and Voter Education Committee, Festus Okoye, stressed that the Commission would transmit results from polling units to its result viewing portal, as witnessed in recent elections, but that the Electoral Act was clear on how collation should be done. Joining us now to examine the likely implications of this interpretation of the Electoral Act by Nigeria's election management body is Daniel Bwala, lawyer and spokesperson for the Atiku Abubakar presidential campaign. Thank you for joining us, Daniel Bwala.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Ruben.
Yeah, very quickly, Dr. Festus Okoye, speaking on behalf of INEC, says that Section 47 of the Electoral Act and Section 50, subsection 2, gives INEC the power to determine the mode of collation of results. And that what INEC has resolved now, that having been given the power under the law, that what will happen in the 2023 election will be a manual collation of results before electronic transmission. Is there any issue with this? Because it was very detailed. In quoting further, Section 60 of the same Electoral Act.
If I have the chance to meet him face to face, the question I would ask him is that in recent time we have had elections conducted in Anambra, in Ekiti, in Edo, and in Oshun. And I would ask him, what was the procedure used for the collation of results? Because we have had like now 3 to 4 places where we have implemented the provisions of the Electoral Act, the innovation that is introduced. And nobody has complained. Everything has been fine. In fact, even if you go to tribunal and see what aggrieved parties are challenging, none of them is challenging like the procedure, because it is something that is transparent. What people oftentimes challenge, for example, a qualification of a candidate or whether he has certificate or not. But why suddenly you're issuing a statement that somewhat look like it is a bit different from what has been going on, which everybody is excited about? You see, the concept of manual transmission of results, in my view, the INEC need to do more in clarifying, because both the collation and the transmission are still part of the same process of the transmission of the result. And so when you say you're collating manually without giving the proper clarification to the people, then everybody will have the fear. People will nurse the fear of where we are coming from, which is that after results are counted at the polling unit, the transmission of the result from the polling unit to the ward is usually where the magic takes place. So I'll give you an instance. If you say you're doing a manual collation without prejudice to the upload, you are now emphasizing manual collation as the principal instrument for the determination of the result. Assuming the polling officer from the polling unit before he gets to the ward manipulates, either change the result, and then he gets to that ward, and conflict arises from the ward, or conflict eventually arises at the local government at the state level, these things will end in court. When they go to court, oftentimes the court will interpret it on the basis of the emphasis of INEC. So if INEC has emphasized like the way they've done now, and to say it's going to be by manual collation, that means where there is a conflict between the manually collated or manipulated result and the one that was uploaded at the polling unit, the court will interpret in favor of the manually collated result, even if it is contrary to what has been collated still manually, but uploaded at the polling unit. So okay. INEC needs to do, in my view, more of clarity. And that same confusion, why people are raising this agitation, is because a few days ago or weeks ago, we had similar incident where Mr. Festus Okoye failed to again clarify a salient point regarding Section 87 and sub 13. Because INEC had earlier said, based on the innovation of the Electoral Act, that they are mandated by law and empowered to reject the submission of a name by a political party and the name of a candidate who did not participate in primaries. But most recently, when he was asked, does INEC have the power to reject? He evaded to answer the question. In fact, when he was asked, when he was pressed further, he now talked about the REC, and he said the REC are not staff of INEC, and therefore INEC is not bound by them. So people tend to think you are laying a foundation so that if tomorrow somebody is challenging it in court to say that this person did not participate in the primaries and he's bringing the result or report of the reg officer, you will say you are not bound by the report of the reg officer because he's not an officer of INEC.
Well, Daniel,
INEC is the one that needs
Bwala,
to do more of the clarification. Yeah.
Daniel Bwala, well, I just have before me on my phone a WhatsApp message, which is a press release that has just been issued by INEC and signed by the self-same Festus Okoye. And it says clarification, precisely what you are asking for, on electronic transmission of election result. If I could read, one or two of the paragraphs. It says INEC's attention has been drawn to a misunderstanding arising from a recent short interview granted to a national newspaper on the procedure for result management during elections. Some have interpreted the explanation on result management procedure to mean that the Commission has jettisoned the electronic transmission of result and reverted to the manual process. This is not correct, the statement says. For clarity, the procedure for result transmission remains the same as in recent governorship elections in Ekiti and Osun states. There will be no change in all future elections, including the 2023 general election. We wish to reassure Nigerians that the electronic transmission of result has come to stay. It adds to the credibility and transparency of the process. There will be no change or deviation in subsequent elections. The entire gamut of result management is provided for in sections 60, 62, and 64 of the Electoral Act 2022. In line with the provisions of the law, the Commission in April this year released a detailed clarification of the procedure for transmission, collation, and declaration of result, which was shared with all stakeholders and was uploaded to our website. We appeal to all Nigerians to avail themselves of the provisions of the Electoral Act and the Commission's detailed explanation of the procedure and not reach a conclusion on the basis of media headlines. Festus Okoye Esquire, National Commissioner and Chairman, Information and Voter Education Committee, Sunday, 21st August 2022. Daniel Bwala, does this settle the matter? Are you satisfied with the clarification?
Yes, it has. And I'm sure he must have done that after probably his attention is drawn to my tweet. And it's very important that he did it by himself. If you read what was reported on his behalf, the interview he granted, and this clarification, you will know that the problem emanated from him. But thankfully, he is quick enough to correct that, which is perfect by me. I would also add that if they can go to the regulation and also make correction of that word card reader, because we are no longer using card reader, we are using beavers. So since the election hasn't come, it's good if they can reproduce the regulation to reflect beavers instead of card reader, because these are technical issues that at the end of the day, when they get to court, they create problems. So this is perfect by me. This clarification he has issued is what has been and what ought to be done, and not the previous interview that he has granted.
Well, the test of any law is in its implementation. And we have seen since the Electoral 2022 came into effect that there have been issues in terms of the interpretation. Do you think that, there may be, in due course, need to take a second look at some of the provisions in the Electoral Act 2022? And for you, what will be those priority sections?
Yeah, okay, so I've actually not taken a deep thought on some of those details, but the one that relates to the 2023 election is where our mind is averted to, because we're immediately confronted by that. And we do not want to bring up a matter that is not covered by the Electoral Act, so it does not create a problem. For example, when we talked about this manual, because you see, why this clarification is necessary is that the whole gamut of the amendment to the Electoral Act is to deal with the issue of the result from the polling unit to any other place it gets to. Because the beginning and the end of election, in terms of the will of the people, is at the polling unit. And so the Electoral Act came to clear it. The way they talked about it is fine. Another thing that they need to also go ahead, and I think I would suggest that Facebook should go ahead and state in categorical terms for the Nigerian people to understand, is that pursuant to the provision of the Electoral Act, on the powers conferred on INEC, in fact, mandatory power, not discretionary, because it says INEC shall reject. It means INEC cannot, for example, in Borno, reject the name of someone who emerged, who did not participate in primaries, and then in Kano accept. No, INEC does not have any discretion. Once there is a report that A, B, and C did not participate in the primaries, INEC is mandated by law to reject. But recently, unless they clarify, most of the individuals in a political party that did not participate in their primaries because of the dual interest in political posts have resurfaced, have found themselves back into INEC when INEC initially said that their names were not submitted and they were not going to receive it. Now, there is a report that INEC is receiving those names. So they need to take a stand and let everybody know. INEC, are you exercising the powers conferred by you or by the law on you to reject, or do you apply it differently? Very, very important.
Well, thank you very much, Daniel Bwala, for joining us on This Day Live, this Sunday talk show. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for having me.